Hi there, this is VenomFangX, and we're going to answer a very frequent question. Who created God? Now, the question itself is actually a fallacy. It doesn't make sense. How can God be created? He wouldn't be God if he was created. He always existed. Now, you're going to say, how could God always exist? Where did he come from? Well, if he always existed, he didn't come from anywhere. He's always been there. And so you say, how is that possible? Well, that's a fair question, so let's answer that. There's a general principle that says either everything came from nothing, which is impossible, or something always existed and created everything that is created. You have no other choice, so which is it? Did everything come from nothing, which is impossible, or did something always exist? Which is it? Well, if you're on the side of logic, you'll certainly agree that nothing can only make nothing, so something obviously created everything, and whatever created everything obviously always existed. So let's just try and figure out what always existed, because some people will simply say, okay, so if something always existed, then the universe, matter, time, and space has always existed, and we don't need to invoke the God into the equation. Well, here's the problem with that. To claim something is eternal, which means it's always existed and always will exist, to claim the universe is eternal is to apply properties of infinity to the universe. So let's try and apply properties of infinity, or eternality, to matter, time, and space, and if we can show you that matter, time, and space could not be eternal or infinite, that means they are created by something that is not made of matter, time, and space, which would then have the properties of God, being immaterial, eternal, and omnipresent. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Okay, so let's start by showing you that matter, time, and space cannot be eternal. Let's take time first. Time is the measure of changes in matter. So imagine flicking a light switch once, okay? Now if I said, I'm going to give you a chocolate bar after you flip a light switch an infinite amount of times, would I ever give you the chocolate bar? The answer is no, because you can't flip a light switch an infinite amount of times. You'd go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you'd go on forever, and you'd never reach infinity. You would always have a finite amount of light switch flicks. So you can't reach infinity using finite instances, or another way of putting it, you can't have an infinite amount of finite things. So time, we know, had a beginning because there could not have been an infinite amount of time before right now. That's simply logical. Or, just so you can get your head around it, could there be an infinite amount of changes, because time is the measure of change? Could there be an infinite amount of changes between two events? Like the chocolate bar example, could I give you something between now and an event in the future if there's an infinite amount of changes, time, between the two events? No, of course not. So that means there couldn't have been an infinite amount of time changes before right now, because we never would have reached this moment in time. Now, if time is finite, which means time had a beginning, and you can't have matter without time, because if you have matter, when do you put it? But there's another way to prove matter can't be infinite either. It's the same way as using the light switch. If there can't be an infinite amount of finite things, then all we need to do is show you that matter itself is finite. So take the nearest object to you, and the nearest one to me is my microphone, or my mouse and keyboard. How many times would I have to multiply, subtract, add, or divide my mouse and keyboard or microphone against itself in order to reach infinity? Well, let's try it. I have one mouse and keyboard. Let's add another one. So now I have 2 mice and keyboard. Let's add another one. Now I have 3 mice and keyboard. How many times would I have to do this in order to reach infinity? The answer is I would never reach infinity, for the same reason you can't flick the light switch an infinite amount of times. So that proves there's only a finite amount of matter, because you can't have an infinite amount of finite things. So we know that matter and time are finite, which means they had a beginning, that they are created, that they cannot be infinite, which means space cannot be infinite, because space is only the measure of the distance between matter, and if matter ceased to exist, there'd be a vacuum, there'd be no space. So if matter is finite, that means space is finite, because there's only a finite distance between the 2 farthest pieces of matter in all of reality. So we know matter, time, and space are finite. They're not infinite, therefore they're not eternal. That means they had a beginning. So what created matter, time, and space? Well, if something exists without matter, time, and space, that means Well, let's figure out the properties of something that exists without matter, time, and space. Well, if you exist without time, and time is the measure of change, that means you never change. That means there's no past or future, there's only an eternal now. And that's exactly why the Bible says God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, because He has never changed, and He never will change. He is God, He is eternal, He has always been. Has it ever occurred to you that nothing ever occurred to God? The past, present, and future are all one, and that's why God knows the future, because He's eternal and exists outside of time. Now, if you exist without matter, that means you are immaterial. That means you can't be touched, you can't be seen, you can't be smelled or tasted. You are not made of matter. Now, if you exist without space, that means you are inspatial or omnipresent. You are everywhere. You're not bound by spatial restrictions. So, something, and we know this as a fact, because we know matter, time, and space were created, and the only thing that can create matter, time, and space is something that exists without matter, time, and space, because if it existed with matter, time, and space, then matter, time, and space wouldn't be created. So we know matter, time, and space were created by something that exists without matter, time, and space, and to exist without matter, time, and space means you are eternal, omnipresent, and immaterial, which are the very traits of God. So something that always existed, that is invisible and untouchable, that is everywhere, created matter, time, and space. What does that sound like to you? Okay, so this is just about the end of the video. Now if anyone asks you who made God, you can just send them this video, and they'll know that God's not created. In order for everything to have been created, you need something that always existed. God always existed, and He always will exist. The only question left is, well, which God is it? How can we know which religion is true? Are any of the religions true? Well, I'm not going to hide anything from you. I'm a Christian, and I believe I have a good reason for being a Christian. God exists without matter, time, and space, which means God knows the future and is everywhere. Well, the Bible is a thick book, and it predicts the future thousands of times, and no other religious book in the world, not the Islamic Quran, not the Book of Mormon, none of them predict the future like the Bible does. That is proof that the Bible was written by God, because men do not know the future, but the Bible sure does. Now, you probably want proof of prophecy. Well, if you check my videos, I've got a few videos about prophecy. You can also do a Google search. Jesus Christ alone fulfilled over 360 prophecies concerning Himself. The Jewish prophets, who lived well before Christ by hundreds of years, foretold His coming in intricate detail. The prophet Daniel said when Jesus would come before the destruction of the Second Temple, which was 2,000 years ago, and the consequences of which Isaiah foretold that the Jews would reject their Messiah. He would be beaten and crucified and be raised from the dead, and bring the Gentiles, which are the non-Jews of the world, to worship the God of the Jews, which is exactly what's happened. There are 2 billion Christians on the planet now, and they worship Jesus Christ, who claimed to be the God of Israel. So, yeah, why don't you look up Bible prophecy? That might just seal the deal for you. So check my videos, and I've also got some links on the side of this video, which you can also check out. God bless you guys. Ciao.